Gordon Chang, thanks for joining us on the Know channel. You are the author of The Coming Collapse of China. And as most people who follow these things would know, China is now the second largest economy in the world. But you contend that the stated growth rate that they have had, and it's been advertised as being in the neighborhood of 7% a year or so, some years even higher than that. What do you think is the real growth rate of the economy of China, and why does that matter to Americans?
Yeah, I think the real growth rate is about 1 or 2%. Last year, Beijing's National Bureau of Statistics reported 6.9% for the year. There is a consensus forming that it's between 3.7 and 4.3. But it doesn't really matter what the growth rate is. The important thing is that it's coming down fast and that Beijing no longer has the ability to change the downward trajectory. They've got an enormous amount of debt, maybe 350% of gross domestic product, maybe 400%, depending on the analyst you talk to. They've got to pay that back at some point. And right now, they're incurring debt at least twice as fast as they're growing, according to official figures, maybe 5 or 6 times as fast when you start looking at the real growth rate.
If China's economy were to implode, and is that what you're arguing, that it will?
I'm arguing that there will be an adjustment. It could be 2 decades of like Japan in the lost decades, but I think more likely a 1929 style adjustment downward. It's going to be a crash, I believe, because Chinese leaders don't have the ability to prevent it at this point.
And I don't mean to be flippant, but should we say just too bad for them, or is there going to be an economic tidal wave that goes across the world economy?
Well, clearly there'll be a tidal wave that'll affect stock markets around the world. We saw this last August when unimportant news out of China resulted in basically $2.1 trillion loss of value in our markets. So yes, there will be a tidal wave. On the economy, though, eventually I think it will be good for us because a lot of activity will move out of China back into the United States. But of course, it's going to be a bad effect everywhere. I think we're going to be affected least of all, largely because we've got a strong and resilient economy. And, we should remember the strengths. The dollar is generally on an upward path, which isn't good for our economy, by the way, but it's because people around the world have confidence in the United States.
When we hear Donald Trump, let's say at this point, looks like he would be the Republican nominee. And he says he's going to bring these jobs back from different countries, and he mentions China. What should we make of that? I mean, are those jobs that should be coming back, or those menial jobs that really it's just better for the Chinese to be doing?
Well, I think that, we're seeing jobs coming back to the U.S. anyway. And there's a number of economic reasons for this, largely because companies realize they've got to be close to their consumer. Also because costs in the United States have come down quite a lot. And in China, there are a number of inhibitions now that are really undermining foreign companies. So these jobs are coming back anyway. And this is just impersonal economic forces working. So this will occur. There are a lot of jobs the U.S. probably will never get back. But those are jobs that, at some point, of course no job is too bad for the United States, but nonetheless, I think we're going to have a transformation of our economy even to more productive sectors, more innovative, and that's really where we should be going. But manufacturing,
because these are low-skilled jobs, so a lot of these that are not going to come back, right? As compared to the United States ought to be focusing on high-skilled jobs that pay more.
Absolutely. China right now is losing low-paying jobs to places like Vietnam, Bangladesh, India. This is occurring, and China's manufacturing sector looks like a rust belt. It's really in trouble. It's contracting, has been for a year or so. It's in much worse shape than our manufacturing sector. These are just forces that are at work, Donald Trump or no Donald Trump.
Do you ever talk to the Chinese leadership? Do they ask you?
They do not call me up and say, what do you think? I do know that they read what I write, but they read a lot of people's work because they are curious. But nonetheless, the problem right now is they've got a political system that will not allow them to make the reforms that are necessary to push China forward.
That's exactly where I was going to go. On one hand, you have this dichotomy of government-controlled, top-down, communist government.
Right.
And yet, on the other hand, I think the Chinese people are almost naturally entrepreneurial. It just seems like they are. And you have all these different people such a large population, and a lot of the Chinese people, since Nixon went to China back in '72, has apparently increased quite a bit as far as the wealth and through capitalism.
Right.
So is your argument one of the core arguments that basically unless Beijing starts to throw out their top-down approach and heavy hand of government, they're not going to be able to make the reforms they need to make?
Yeah, they can't. Xi Jinping, the new ruler, he actually believes in a 1950s model. We see him taking already large state enterprises, making them into formal monopolies. He's actually increasing state ownership of state enterprises. He's attacking foreign companies, closing down the market, putting more state money into favored market participants. This is exactly the wrong direction.
We'll let you go here, but what would you advise people who want to insulate themselves from any economic, whether a business or an individual, what would you advise people to do if we are in fact going to have this kind of a collapse of the Chinese economy?
U.S. real estate, U.S. dollars, and if they're really pessimistic, gold.
All right, Gordon Chang, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.